I never thought the day would come when my own father would look me in the eye and tell me I was no longer his son. But there I stood in his study, surrounded by decades of family photos and cattle show ribbons, listening to him explain why my name had been struck from his will. "You've disappointed me for the last time, Jake," he said, not even bothering to look up from the legal documents spread across his mahogany desk. "The ranch will go to your cousin Marcus when I'm gone." Marcus. The golden boy who'd never worked a day on this land, who lived in Dallas and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The same Marcus who couldn't tell a Holstein from a Hereford if his life depended on it. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. This ranch had been in our family for 4 generations. I'd grown up here, learned to ride before I could properly walk, spent every summer mending fences and hauling feed. Every scar on my hands told a story of this place. "Dad, you can't be serious," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He finally looked up, his steel-gray eyes cold as winter. "I've already changed the locks. You have until sunset to collect your things and get off my property." The words hit me like a physical blow. 25 years of my life reduced to a few hours to pack my belongings. I thought about arguing, about reminding him of all the times I'd saved his cattle during harsh winters, all the 18-hour days I'd worked without complaint. But the look in his eyes told me it would be pointless. His mind was made up. The metallic click of the new lock echoed in the evening air as I tried my key one last time. It didn't work, just as I'd expected. Standing on the porch of the house where I'd been born, I felt like a stranger looking in on someone else's life. Through the window, I could see the kitchen where my mother used to make breakfast before dawn, where she'd pack lunches for the long days ahead. She'd been gone 3 years now, and I wondered what she'd think of this moment. Would she have sided with Dad, or would she have fought for me? My truck was loaded with everything I owned, which wasn't much. A few changes of clothes, some tools, my grandfather's pocket watch, and a photograph of the family from better times. Everything else belonged to the ranch, according to Dad. I drove to the old foreman's cabin at the edge of the property, the one place Dad had said I could stay temporarily. It was barely more than a shack, with a leaky roof and windows that didn't quite close properly. But it was shelter, and it was still technically on ranch land. As I unloaded my belongings in the fading light, I caught sight of the main pasture where Thunder Ridge stood grazing. Even from this distance, the massive Angus bull was impressive, Dad's pride and joy worth more than most people's houses. Thunder Ridge had won every major show in Texas for the past 3 years, and his offspring commanded premium prices at auction. I'd helped raise that bull from a calf, spent countless hours training him, grooming him, preparing him for shows. Now he was just another thing that no longer belonged to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was homeless on my own family's land, watching over cattle I could no longer claim. 3 days passed in the cramped cabin before I discovered the extent of Dad's betrayal. I'd been surviving on canned beans and instant coffee, trying to figure out my next move, when Marcus showed up with a real estate agent. I watched from my window as they walked the property, Marcus gesturing broadly while the agent took notes. They spent a long time examining the main house, the barns, and especially the prize cattle. When they approached Thunder Ridge's pasture, I saw Marcus pull out his phone and start taking pictures. That's when it hit me. Dad wasn't just cutting me out of the inheritance. He was planning to sell. Everything my great-grandfather had built, everything 4 generations of our family had poured their lives into, was going to be liquidated for cash. I thought about the conversations I'd overheard between Dad and his lawyer, the hushed phone calls that stopped whenever I entered the room. It all made sense now. Dad was sick, sicker than he'd let on, and instead of keeping the ranch in the family, he was converting everything to liquid assets for Marcus to inherit. The ranch would be sold to developers. The cattle would be auctioned off. The land where my ancestors were buried would become strip malls and subdivisions. That evening, I called my Uncle Pete, Dad's younger brother who'd moved to Colorado years ago after a falling out with the family. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it would be him. "I'm not surprised," Pete said after I explained the situation. "Your dad always was stubborn as a mule. But Jake, you need to know something about Thunder Ridge." My heart stopped. "What about him?" "That bull isn't just registered under the ranch's name. Check the paperwork in your grandfather's old desk. There might be something there that changes everything." Breaking into the main house felt wrong, even though I'd lived there my entire life. But Pete's words had planted a seed of hope, and I had to know what he meant about Thunder Ridge's paperwork. I waited until Dad left for his weekly doctor's appointment in town, then used the spare key hidden under the loose board on the back porch, a hiding spot that hadn't changed since I was a kid. The house felt different now, like a museum of my former life. Grandfather's desk sat in the corner of Dad's study, mostly used for storage these days. I'd seen Dad go through it occasionally, but I'd never paid much attention to what he was looking for. Now I methodically searched every drawer, every folder, every yellowed document. In the bottom drawer, behind a stack of old cattle vaccination records, I found a manila envelope with my name written on it in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a bill of sale dated 15 years ago, when Thunder Ridge was just a promising young bull. My hands trembled as I read the document. Thunder Ridge hadn't been purchased by the ranch. He'd been purchased by me, with money from my grandfather's inheritance. I'd been 17 at the time, and Grandfather had insisted on putting the bull in my name as a way to teach me about investment and responsibility. I'd completely forgotten about it. Over the years, as Thunder Ridge became the ranch's star attraction, everyone just assumed he belonged to Dad. Even I had started thinking of him that way. But according to this document, Thunder Ridge was mine. Legally, completely mine. I photocopied the bill of sale and carefully returned the original to its hiding place. As I locked the house behind me, my mind was already racing with possibilities. That night, I sat in the cabin staring at the photocopied bill of sale by lamplight. Thunder Ridge was worth at least $1 million, maybe more to the right buyer. But this wasn't just about money, it was about justice. I thought about the Hendersons, our family's oldest rivals. The feud went back 3 generations, starting with a disputed property line and escalating through decades of competition at cattle shows, bid wars at auctions, and general bad blood. Dad would rather burn money than see it go to old Samuel Henderson. Samuel's grandson, Tom Henderson, ran their operation now. He was about my age, and we'd actually gotten along well during our brief interactions at cattle shows, much to our father's dismay. Tom had always admired Thunder Ridge, and I'd heard through the grapevine that he'd made several offers to buy the bull over the years. All of those offers had been rejected, of course. Dad would never sell to a Henderson regardless of the price. But Dad didn't own Thunder Ridge. I did. I pulled out my phone and found Tom's number. It was nearly midnight, but this couldn't wait. The phone rang 3 times before his sleepy voice answered. "Tom, it's Jake Morrison. I know it's late, but I have a proposition for you." There was a long pause. "Jake, is everything all right?" "That depends on how serious you were about wanting to buy Thunder Ridge." Another pause, longer this time. When Tom spoke again, his voice was fully alert. "I'm listening." I explained the situation, my father's betrayal, the planned sale of the ranch, and most importantly, the bill of sale that proved Thunder Ridge was mine to sell. "Are you absolutely certain about the ownership?" Tom asked. "I have the paperwork. It's ironclad." "Then yes, I'm very interested. When can we meet?" Tom Henderson arrived at dawn, driving a pristine white pickup truck that looked like it had never seen a day of real work. But when he stepped out, I was reminded that despite our family's rivalry, Tom was a serious cattleman who knew his business. We met at the fence line of Thunder Ridge's pasture, both of us keeping our voices low even though Dad wouldn't be back from town for hours. The massive bull grazed peacefully nearby, unaware that his future was being decided. "He's even more impressive up close," Tom said, his eyes never leaving Thunder Ridge. "I've been watching his offspring at auctions. They're commanding top dollar." I handed him the photocopied bill of sale. Tom examined it carefully, his expression growing more serious with each line he read. "This is legitimate," he said finally. "But Jake, you realize what this means? If you sell to me, there's no going back. Your father will never forgive you." "He's already made it clear I'm not his son anymore," I replied. "At this point, I'm just protecting my own interests." Tom nodded slowly. "I can offer you $1.2 million. Cash. But I need to move fast. If your father finds out what we're planning, he'll find a way to stop it." $1.2 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. Enough to start over anywhere I wanted, maybe even buy my own ranch someday. "There's one condition," I said. "I want to be there when you tell him. I want to see his face when he realizes what happened." Tom's expression was grim. "Jake, that's not going to be pretty. Your father and mine have been enemies for 30 years. "I know. That's exactly why I want to be there." We shook hands on the deal, and Tom promised to have the paperwork ready by afternoon. The paperwork was surprisingly simple. Tom arrived with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who'd driven up from Austin specifically for this deal. We met at the cabin, spreading documents across my small kitchen table, while Thunder Ridge grazed in the distance. "The ownership transfer is straightforward," the lawyer explained. "Since Mr. Morrison has clear title to the animal, he can sell to whomever he chooses. We'll need to update the registration papers with the American Angus Association, but that's just a formality." I signed my name on line after line, each signature feeling like another step away from my old life. When it was done, Tom handed me a cashier's check for $200,000. I stared at it for a long moment, hardly believing it was real. "We'll pick him up tomorrow morning," Tom said. "I've got a trailer coming and a crew to help with the loading. Thunder Ridge is gentle enough, but moving a bull that size requires proper equipment." After they left, I sat alone in the cabin holding the check. Part of me felt sick about what I'd done. Thunder Ridge had been like family to me. I'd bottle-fed him as a calf, trained him for his first show, celebrated every victory he'd won. But another part of me felt a fierce satisfaction. Dad had tried to take everything from me, to erase me from the family legacy. Now he'd learned that some things couldn't be taken so easily. I thought about calling him, giving him a chance to make things right before it was too late. But then I remembered the coldness in his eyes when he'd told me I was no longer his son, the way he'd changed the locks without a second thought. No, he'd made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. I folded the check carefully and put it in my wallet, then walked outside to say goodbye to Thunder Ridge. Thunder Ridge looked up as I approached the fence, his massive head tilting slightly as if he recognized me. I'd brought him an apple, his favorite treat, and he took it gently from my palm, his rough tongue tickling my fingers. "I'm sorry, old friend," I whispered, running my hand along his neck. "This isn't how I wanted things to go." The bull seemed to sense something was different. He stayed close to the fence instead of wandering back to his favorite grazing spot, his dark eyes watching me with what almost looked like concern. I thought about all the hours we'd spent together over the years, teaching him to lead properly for shows, grooming his coat until it shone like black silk, the pride I'd felt when the judges announced his name as grand champion year after year. Thunder Ridge had been more than just a valuable animal. He'd been proof that I belonged on this ranch, that I had inherited the family gift for raising exceptional cattle. Now he was my ticket to a different life, one I'd never planned or wanted. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, I could see the lights of the main house where Dad was probably having dinner, completely unaware that his world was about to change. Tomorrow, Tom Henderson would arrive with his trailer. Thunder Ridge would be loaded up and driven away to a new home, a new life with our family's oldest enemies. And Dad would finally understand that actions have consequences. I gave Thunder Ridge one last pat and walked back to the cabin. There was nothing left to do now but wait for morning. Tom Henderson arrived at exactly 7 a.m., followed by a convoy that looked like a military operation. 2 pickup trucks, a massive livestock trailer designed specifically for prize bulls, and 4 ranch hands who clearly knew their business. I watched from the cabin window as they set up, positioning the trailer and laying out the loading equipment with practiced efficiency. Tom had obviously done this before. Moving valuable animals required precision and patience. Dad's truck wasn't in the driveway yet. He usually left early for his morning rounds, checking on the cattle in the far pastures. But he'd be back soon, and when he saw what was happening, all hell would break loose. I walked out to meet Tom, who was directing his crew with quiet authority. He looked up as I approached, his expression serious. "You sure about this, Jake? Once we load him up, there's no undoing it." "I'm sure," I said, though my stomach was churning with nerves. Thunder Ridge seemed to sense the activity around his pasture. He stood at the far end, watching the strangers with wary eyes. Getting him into the trailer would require careful handling. Despite his gentle nature, he was still a 2,000-pound animal with the power to seriously hurt someone if he panicked. "We'll take our time," Tom said. "No point in rushing and risking injury to anyone, including Thunder Ridge." One of his ranch hands approached with a lead rope and a bucket of grain. Thunder Ridge was halter-trained, of course. He'd been led into countless show rings over the years, but this was different. This was goodbye. As the ranch hand slowly approached the bull, I heard the sound of a truck engine in the distance. Dad was coming back. "That's him," I told Tom. "You might want to hurry." Tom's jaw tightened. "We do this right, regardless of who's watching." Dad's truck came to a screeching halt when he saw the Henderson vehicles in his driveway. I watched him jump out, his face already red with anger as he took in the scene. The trailer, the crew, and Thunder Ridge being led slowly toward the loading ramp. "What the hell is going on here?" he shouted, striding toward us with his fists clenched. Tom stepped forward, his hands raised peacefully. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Tom Henderson. I'm here to collect a bull I just purchased." "Purchased?" Dad's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're on my property, trying to steal my bull." "Actually, sir, Thunder Ridge isn't your bull," Tom said calmly. He pulled out a copy of the bill of sale and handed it to Dad. "He belongs to your son." Dad snatched the paper and read it quickly, his face growing paler with each word. When he finished, his eyes found mine across the yard, and the look of betrayal there almost made me flinch. "Jake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What have you done?" "What I had to do," I replied, walking closer. "You cut me out of the family, Dad. You changed the locks and told me I wasn't your son anymore. But you forgot that some things were already mine. That bull is worth everything to this ranch." "And this ranch was worth everything to me," I shot back. "But that didn't stop you from planning to sell it to developers." Dad's face went white. "How did you—" "I saw Marcus here with the real estate agent. I know what you're planning." For a moment, Dad looked older than his 65 years. The fight seemed to go out of him as he watched Thunder Ridge being led up the ramp into the trailer. "Please," he said quietly, "don't do this." But it was too late. Thunder Ridge was already loaded, and Tom's crew was securing the trailer for transport. The sound of the trailer pulling away echoed across the ranch like a death knell. Dad stood in the driveway, still holding the bill of sale, watching his prize bull disappear down the road toward the Henderson ranch. 30 years, he said finally, his voice hollow. 30 years I've been building this herd, and you just handed our best genetics to the enemy." "You handed me to the enemy first," I replied. "You chose Marcus over your own son. You chose money over family." Dad turned to face me, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw something other than anger in his eyes. I saw pain. "I was trying to protect the ranch," he said. "The medical bills, the debt. I thought if Marcus inherited cash instead of land, it would be simpler. I thought you'd understand." "Understand what? That I wasn't good enough to carry on the family legacy?" "No, that I was dying." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd known Dad was sick, but dying. "What are you talking about?" "Cancer," he said simply. "Stage 4. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. All this time, I'd thought he was cutting me out of spite or disappointment. I'd never considered that he might be trying to protect me from something worse. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because I knew you'd try to talk me out of selling. You'd want to keep the ranch running, take on the debt, sacrifice your future for a piece of land." "It's not just a piece of land, Dad. It's our family's history. And now it's gone," he said, looking toward where Thunder Ridge had disappeared, "along with any chance of paying off what we owe." That evening, Dad and I sat on the porch of the main house for the first time in weeks. He'd unlocked the door without a word, and I'd followed him inside, both of us moving carefully around the landmine of emotions between us. "The debt is worse than you know," Dad said, staring out at the empty pasture where Thunder Ridge used to graze. "Between the medical bills and the loans I took to keep the ranch running, we're looking at close to $2 million. $2 million. The number hit me like a sledgehammer. Even with the money from selling Thunder Ridge, it wouldn't be enough to save the ranch. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked. "We could have figured something out together." "What could you have done? You're 25 years old with no credit and no collateral. The bank wasn't going to listen to you." "I could have helped. I could have gotten a job in town, brought in extra income." Dad laughed bitterly. "A job in town wouldn't even cover the interest on what we owe." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over land that had been in our family for 4 generations. Soon, it would belong to strangers who would probably tear down everything we'd built. "I'm sorry," Dad said finally. "I should have told you about the cancer from the beginning. I should have explained why I was making the decisions I made." "And I'm sorry about Thunder Ridge," I replied. "I was angry, and I wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt me." "Did it work?" I thought about the look on his face when he'd watched the trailer pull away, the defeat in his voice when he'd talked about 30 years of work being undone in a single morning. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It worked." But the victory felt hollow now, knowing what I knew about his illness, about the impossible situation he'd been trying to navigate alone. The next morning, I drove to the Henderson Ranch with a proposition that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Tom met me at the gate, his expression cautious. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "I want to buy Thunder Ridge back," I said. Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Buy him back? You just sold him to me yesterday." "I know, and I'll pay you a fair profit for the trouble, but I need him back." We walked to the pasture where Thunder Ridge was settling into his new surroundings. The bull looked up as we approached, and I swear I saw recognition in his eyes. "This is about your father, isn't it?" Tom said. I nodded. "He's dying. Cancer. And the ranch is drowning in debt. I thought selling Thunder Ridge would be my revenge, but it turns out I was just making everything worse." Tom was quiet for a long moment, studying Thunder Ridge with the eye of a cattleman who understood the animal's true value. "I'll sell him back to you," he said finally. "Same price I paid. No profit." "Tom, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "This feud between our families has gone on long enough. Maybe it's time for our generation to do things differently." We shook hands on the deal, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. "There's one more thing," Tom said as we walked back toward the house. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about your father planning to sell to developers." "What about it? What if there was another option? What if someone wanted to buy the ranch to keep it as a ranch?" I stopped walking. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying the Henderson Ranch could use more land, and your father's operation could use an investor. Maybe we could work something out. 6 months later, I stood in the same pasture where this whole story began, watching Thunder Ridge graze peacefully in the morning sun. But everything else had changed. The Morrison-Henderson Ranch, as it was now officially known, was thriving under the new partnership. Tom had bought out the debt and become a 50-50 partner with Dad, bringing fresh capital and new ideas while preserving the legacy both our families had built over generations. Dad's cancer treatment was going better than expected. The experimental therapy his new insurance covered had shrunk the tumors significantly, and his doctors were cautiously optimistic about his prognosis. Marcus had been furious about the change in plans, of course. He'd threatened to sue, claiming he'd been promised an inheritance. But Dad's lawyer had pointed out that a man has the right to change his will as often as he likes, especially when circumstances change so dramatically. The old feud between our families hadn't disappeared overnight, but it was fading. Working together every day, sharing the responsibilities and rewards of ranch life, had shown both sides that we had more in common than we'd ever realized. Thunder Ridge had sired 3 calves since returning home, each one showing the promise of their father's exceptional genetics. The future of the herd looked brighter than ever. As I watched the bull that had started this whole chain of events, I reflected on how quickly life can change. A few months ago, I'd been homeless on my own family's land, bitter and angry about my father's betrayal. Now I was a partner in a thriving operation, with a future that looked nothing like what I'd planned, but everything like what I'd always wanted. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Thank you for listening to this story of family, betrayal, and unexpected redemption. I hope it reminded you that even in our darkest moments, there's always a chance for things to turn around in ways we never expected. Please let me know in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. I love hearing from viewers all around the globe. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more tales of family drama, small-town secrets, and the complicated relationships that shape our lives. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best way forward is to find a way to build bridges instead of burning them down.